Welcome to Veiled Narratives, where stories breathe, hearts awaken, and emotions find a voice. Today, we bring you a tale of power, humility, and a love that shattered every wall ever built by pride and destiny. He was a man the world whispered about in awe. Adrian Sterling, a billionaire who built empires from dust, the kind who commanded boardrooms with a single glance and reshaped industries with the flick of a pen. Power wasn't just in his hands, it lived in his silence, breathed in his presence, and feared to leave his shadow. Yet behind that dominance lived a man untouched by warmth. His victories were loud, but his nights painfully silent. His life had everything except a heartbeat that made him feel alive. Until her. She came like a soft breeze on a storm-hardened shore. Alara, a girl with nothing but a notebook full of dreams and a smile that could soften the universe. She owned no diamonds, no estates, only kindness, courage, and a hope brighter than his towers of steel. He saw her first at a street cafe, serving customers with a warmth money could never buy. Her laughter was sunlight, her eyes held galaxies. Where he ruled the world through power, she ruled hearts through love. At first curiosity, then admiration, and slowly fate began to weave. Each day he returned, not for coffee, but for the girl who served hope in every cup. She spoke without fear, challenged his ideas, asked him who he was beyond wealth. No one ever dared, but she did, effortlessly. And the man who conquered empires felt his walls crumble. He flew across continents for her. He left meetings worth billions just to sit beside her in silence. In her presence he wasn't a king, he was simply a man, longing to be understood. When she laughed, he felt life. When she cried, he felt pain. When she touched his hand for the first time, he felt home. The world questioned her worth. Papers mocked her background. Social circles whispered, "She has nothing." Adrian simply smiled and answered, "Then she has everything." Because she never needed wealth to be priceless. He gave her the world, but she gave him something rarer. A reason to feel. A reason to breathe. A reason to live not as a billionaire, but as a man in love. And the empire builder surrendered, not to power, not to defeat, but to the girl with nothing, who unknowingly held everything. In a world sculpted from marble, glass, and power, Adrian Sterling stood like a monument to human ambition. His empire stretched across continents, skyscrapers bearing his name, private jets with his monogram etched in gold, boardrooms that hushed when he entered, and a legacy woven from brilliance, discipline, and fire. He wore power like others wore breathing, effortlessly, silently, and with a presence that demanded worship. To the world he was untouchable, unbreakable, a sovereign of success. Yet behind the diamond cufflinks, beneath the perfectly tailored Italian suits, there was a quiet emptiness. A silence untouched by love, laughter, or softness. In the quiet corners of his penthouse, a palace towering above a city of lights, he sometimes wondered, was there anything left to conquer if he could not feel his own heart beat for someone? But destiny does not knock loudly. Sometimes it enters as a whisper. Sometimes it walks in wearing simplicity and grace. And destiny arrived in his life not in boardrooms or luxury galas, but in a place so ordinary that fate itself seemed amused. A small street cafe, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, where dreams tasted like morning pastries and hopes smelled like fresh coffee beans. He had stopped there only because his driver took a wrong turn. Great stories begin with accidents or divine timing. Through the cafe window he saw her, not glittering like diamond but glowing like dawn. Not trying to be noticed, yet impossible to ignore. Alara, she wore no designer clothes. Just a simple cream dress with sleeves rolled up, and a stray curl dancing against her cheek as she worked. No jewelry, no luxury, only a quiet grace that made the universe pause. There was a softness in her eyes, one that did not bow to power but rose with kindness. She moved with ease, smiling at strangers, wiping tables with gentle care, offering warmth in a world obsessed with status. She had nothing, but she was everything he never realized he needed. Adrian entered, expecting another place to pass time. Instead, he stepped into a world where his titles meant nothing. Where who he was mattered more than what he owned. "Good morning," she greeted, voice like silk dipped in sunshine. Not a flicker of recognition of his status. Not awe, just sincerity. He was accustomed to trembling greetings, forced smiles, bowed heads. But she looked at him like he was simply human. "What would you like?" she asked softly. He paused, the man who made billion-dollar decisions in seconds suddenly unable to choose a coffee. Everything felt unfamiliar, the warmth, the simplicity, the peace. "Whatever you'd recommend," he replied. Not because he didn't know what he wanted, but because, for the first time, he wanted to be led, not obeyed. She gave him a lat with a heart drawn on it, imperfect but beautiful. He stared at that cup longer than he stared at corporate contracts worth nations. She returned to her work, unaware that she had just shaken the throne of a king. He watched her. The way she laughed with a child spilling milk. The tenderness in her voice offering a free pastry to an old man who forgot his wallet. The joy she found in ordinary moments, moments he had never slowed down enough to feel. He, who owned palaces, realized he had never owned peace, and she, who owned nothing, held an entire universe in her smile. He returned the next day and the next, until it no longer felt like a stop, it felt like home. The billionaire who commanded worlds found himself waiting just to hear her say, "Good morning," just to see her tuck a stray curl behind her ear, just to feel human in a world where he was worshipped, not known. He did not tell her who he was, not yet. For the first time in his life, he wanted someone to see him without the crown. In her presence he wasn't Adrian Sterling, the Empire King. He was simply Adrian, a man discovering his heart for the first time. And in the silent spaces between her words, he realized something extraordinary. He had conquered cities, industries, and futures, but it was this girl with dreams instead of diamonds who conquered him without even trying. Love had entered quietly. But kings don't fall loudly, they surrender in whispers, in longing, in moments where the world stops, because one simple soul has become more valuable than all the gold ever mined. And in that tiny cafe, surrounded by ordinary life, a billionaire surrendered, not to power, not to defeat, but to the most extraordinary force in existence, a heart that finally found its reason to beat. Days turned into weeks, and the cafe became more than a stop. It became a sanctuary, a place where the world's most powerful man could finally breathe without the weight of crowns and expectations. Every morning, Adrian arrived before sunrise, disguised in simplicity, a billionaire hidden beneath a white shirt and rolled sleeves, without his usual fleet of black luxury cars and security shadows. Here, he did not own the world. Here, he owned moments. With her, Alara always noticed him. Not because he demanded attention, but because he carried silence like a storm carrying secrets. There was a softness that flickered in his eyes whenever she spoke, a gentleness that clashed beautifully with the quiet authority in his posture. She did not know who he was, but she felt what he was becoming, something unfamiliar, something vulnerable, something tender. He often sat at the corner table near the window, where golden light draped across his features like a lover claiming him. He watched the street come alive outside in her, quietly transforming his world inside. She'd bring his coffee without asking now, the same lat, the same imperfect heart foam, but every day that heart felt more real, more his. "Do you always look like you're holding the universe in your thoughts?" she teased him one morning, his lips curved, a rare, unguarded smile. "Only when the universe is sitting in front of me." Her breath caught. She looked away, cheeks warmed, but her heart it fluttered. She didn't understand why a stranger's words could feel like silk tracing her skin, could make her wonder about things she did not dare to dream. He admired her innocence, but it was not of it. It was purity, the kind born not from sheltered life, but from choosing kindness despite life's harshness. One rainy afternoon, the cafe was quiet, the city wrapped in a silver veil. She wiped tables while he watched her fingers trace patterns on the wood, her mind drifting. "Alara," he said softly, the first time speaking her name. She paused, surprised. "How do you know my name?" "I pay attention to the things that matter." Her heartbeat stumbled. Most men noticed her only enough to order coffee or offer meaningless flirtation. But he paid attention. "And what else have you noticed?" she asked, leaning lightly against the counter. "That you love rainy days more than sunny ones." She raised a brow. "How would you know that?" "You smile differently when it rains." He replied, voice slow, warm, like the world finally matches the softness you carry inside. Her breath trembled. Nobody had ever seen her the way he did. "And you," she whispered, "look like someone who forgot how to rest." His chest tightened, not from pain, but from recognition, like she had touched a part of him he kept locked behind steel walls. He lowered his gaze, voice like velvet bruised with truth. "Rest was never something I could afford." "Everyone can afford peace," she replied gently. "Some just don't know where to find it." He lifted his eyes slowly, meeting hers. "What if I already found it?" The room fell silent, the world shrinking, until only they existed in it. Then life interrupted, as it always does when hearts begin to notice each other. A group of sharply dressed men entered the cafe, his security team, unable to tolerate his low-profile games any longer. They bowed slightly when they saw him. "Sir, your board meeting is in 20 minutes. The car is waiting." "Sir, car, meeting, board." Her eyes widened, confusion flickering, then shock, like reality had rushed in with icy breath. "You have a board meeting?" she asked quietly. He inhaled slowly. Here it was, the truth clawing its way forward. "Alara," he spoke gently, "I wanted time before telling you who I am." She stepped back, heart stumbling between awe and disbelief. "Who are you?" The men shifted awkwardly. They knew the weight of that question. He looked at her not as a king revealing his crown, but as a man afraid to lose the one person who saw him without it. "My name is Adrian Sterling." She blinked, the world tilting. The Adrian Sterling, the name printed on skyscrapers, whispered by tycoons, envied by nations. The man who sat in her cafe, quietly watching sunrises. "You're," she whispered. He nodded softly. "Yes." Silence, not the peaceful kind. A storm silence, shocked, fragile, trembling. Her voice broke like glass. "Why would someone like you come here? Why pretend?" He stepped closer, not as a billionaire, but as a man terrified of losing the only truth he ever found. "Because here, I am not the world's Adrian Sterling. I'm just Adrian." His voice lowered, vulnerable. "And for the first time that feels like enough." Her lips trembled, eyes shining, torn between wonder and fear. "Tell me this isn't a game," she whispered. His jaw tightened, emotion deep and raw. "Empires are games. This is the only thing real I've ever known." Outside, rain kissed the windows. Inside, two worlds stood at the edge of collision. One built on power, the other on purity. She wasn't sure whether to run from him or toward him. But fate had already chosen. The storm had begun, and love, whether welcomed or feared, had already taken root. And neither wealth nor simplicity would emerge unchanged. Rain whispered against the cafe windows, as if heaven itself feared the silence between them. Adrian, a man whose decisions shaped economies, suddenly stood helpless, waiting for the judgment of a girl who owned nothing but sincerity. Alara's heart raced, her fingers trembling slightly around the cloth she held. Her eyes searched his face. Not the billionaire that headlines worshipped, but the quiet man who drank lattes and noticed Rain's smiles. Yet truth changes everything, and innocence suddenly stood face to face with a kingdom. "Why me?" she whispered, voice fragile like porcelain in trembling hands. "There are women who would cross oceans just to breathe in your presence." His eyes softened. "A storm breaking into sunlight. And yet none of them ever made me feel human." He stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wild, precious thing that might flee if startled. "You look at me like I'm not made of titles," he said softly. "You ask me questions no one dares. You laugh without needing permission. You make silence feel safe." Ilara swallowed. The truth was heavy, beautiful, terrifying. "But our worlds," she murmured, "they're different." "Different doesn't mean impossible," he replied, voice a silk-clad promise. Lightning flashed outside, painting him in gold and shadow. For the first time, he wasn't a statue of power. He was a man reaching, hoping, afraid to lose something priceless. She turned away, breath shaky. "What if I'm not enough for your world?" He exhaled deeply, the kind of breath a man releases only when his soul aches. "Alara, you are the one place my world finally feels enough." She closed her eyes. Those words, they weren't polished like the speeches of powerful men. They trembled like truth. He reached out, not touching her, but letting his hand hover, an invitation, not a claim. "I didn't hide who I am to deceive you," he said quietly. "I hid it because I wanted to know if someone could see me, not the empire." A tear escaped her, soft, unannounced. She wasn't crying from fear, but from the weight of being chosen by a man who could have anyone, yet wanted her. "Adrian," she whispered, finally looking up. "When powerful people fall, they fall hard, and they take everything with them." He smiled faintly, but there was a tenderness behind it, like he'd just been handed the truth he always feared. "Then let me fall," he answered. "As long as it's toward you." Her breath tangled in her chest. For a moment, the world outside vanished, the city lights, the power, the fears. Only two hearts, learning the rhythm of each other, existed. But fate is never gentle with love that crosses worlds. The door chimed, soft but sharp enough to shatter the fragile moment. In walked a woman draped in couture and confidence, tall, elegant, sparkling diamonds like armor. Victoria Hale, heiress, social icon, and the woman society assumed would one day stand beside Adrian. She halted, eyes widening at the sight of him. Adrian, what on earth are you doing here? Her gaze shifted to Alara, curiosity sharpening into judgment. The air thickened. Adrian straightened, not arrogantly, but protectively. I'm here for coffee, he said calmly. She laughed softly, polished, practiced. Darling, cafes like this are aesthetic for pictures, not for you. Alara's stomach tightened. Suddenly she was the outsider, the one with no language for this glittering world of power and privilege. Adrian's voice dropped, firm and grounded. I come here because I want to, and because the company here is better than any $1,000,000 table. Victoria's eyes narrowed, noticing the softness in his tone when he glanced toward Alara. So this is why the media hasn't seen you in weeks. You've been hiding in coffee shops. Alara felt exposed, as if someone had torn the quiet sanctuary open. Adrian placed a gentle hand on the counter, near Alara's, not touching, but choosing. Alara isn't a secret, he said softly, letting the room hear truth. She is someone I value. Alara's heart stopped. Value, not possession, not convenience. Value, the highest currency of a man who owned fortunes. Victoria forced a tight smile. Interesting. Her heels clicked as she stepped back. We'll speak later. Privately, she left, leaving behind her perfume and poison. Silence returned, raw, heavier than before. Alara whispered, "This is your world, powerful, loud, watched, judged." She shook her head gently, breath trembling with fear and wonder. And I'm just, he cut in gently, the person who matters. She looked into his eyes, searching again. This time, she found vulnerability, devotion, and a kingdom willing to kneel for her. But love born between two worlds does not walk an easy road. I don't know how to do this, she confessed, voice almost breaking. I don't know how to fit into a life like yours. He reached, finally touching her hand, warm, steady, reverent. You don't have to fit into my world, he whispered. We'll build a new one where both of us belong. Her heart didn't just beat, it soared, trembled, surrendered. In that small cafe, surrounded by rain and fate, a billionaire made a promise, not to protect her from the world, but to stand with her against it. And as their fingers intertwined, gently uncertain but brave, two lives began to rewrite destiny, not as a king and a girl, but as two souls choosing each other, against fear, against status, against fate. Love had not just begun, it had declared war on every boundary ever drawn between hearts. The days that followed felt like the fragile hush before a storm, beautiful, trembling, dangerous. Adrian's quiet visits to the cafe no longer went unnoticed. It began with curious eyes, then whispers, then cameras, hungry, merciless, devouring. Alara stood behind the counter, her small world shrinking as screens everywhere flashed his face, and hers beside it. Billionaire Adrian Sterling seen with unknown cafe girl. Mystery woman steals the Empire King's attention. Who is she, gold digger or Cinderella? Cruel words, sharp as glass. She never asked for fame, she never sought his world. But suddenly it knocked like thunder, no, like a judgment. One morning, she walked to the cafe and found reporters outside, cameras blinding, questions stabbing. Are you dating him? What do you want from him? Did he buy you that dress? Are you using him for money? Her hands shook as she pushed through. Inside, she felt safe, until she saw him sitting there. Adrian rose the moment she entered. Concern rippled across his face, not as a tycoon guarding reputation, but as a man terrified of losing the one person who made him human. Alara, he breathed, stepping toward her like she was air and he'd been suffocating. She stopped him, pain clouding her eyes. Your world is burning mine, she whispered. A slow ache settled in his chest. Alara, I never wanted to hurt you. I know, she replied softly, but it's happening. He wanted to gather her in his arms, pull the world away like curtains hiding a sunrise. But she stood still, beautiful, trembling, uncertain. Come with me, he said gently. Leave all this. Let me protect you. She looked around, at the tiny cafe where she built her courage, at her apron still lying on the counter, at the steaming coffee machine humming like routine trying to hold her together. This is my life, she whispered. My little world. I worked for it. I earned it. I'm not ready to abandon myself just because someone powerful entered my story. His heart swelled with admiration. She was not fragile glass. She was quiet steel. He approached slowly, like she was a prayer, and he feared breaking the silence of faith. "You don't have to leave anything behind," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't want to change you, I just want to stand with you." Her eyes shimmered. "Alara," he continued, voice low and reverent, "you are the one thing in my life I didn't build. You are the one thing God gave me." Her breath caught. The world seemed to soften for one brief, sacred moment. But life does not surrender to tenderness so easily. The cafe door slammed open. Victoria entered, not with elegance this time, but with fury disguised in diamonds and control. "Oh look," she said, voice dripping honey and venom, "the kingdom has found its charity case." Alara flinched, but stood tall. Adrian moved in front of her, jaw iron, eyes sharp. "Victoria, leave." She laughed, sharp, brittle. "You think this little fantasy will last? She doesn't belong in your world. She'll collapse under the weight of your name." Alara spoke, voice soft but steady. "I never asked for his name." Victoria's eyes hardened. "No, but you took his attention. That's worse." Adrian's voice carved the air like marble. "She didn't take it, I gave it." Victoria's mask cracked, jealousy, disbelief, rage. "You are destroying everything for her," she spat. "Reputation, alliances, power." "Power means nothing if it costs peace," he replied quietly. Victoria's voice wavered, bitterness cut by heartbreak. "She will never understand your world. She will never stand where I stand." Alara met her gaze with soft strength. "I don't want your world. I want mine, and the part of him that doesn't belong to power." The cafe fell silent. Victoria stared, then scoffed, turning sharply toward Adrian. "Empires don't bend for love. Remember that." She left, heels echoing like war drums fading. When she was gone, Adrian finally turned back to Alara. His voice trembled, not with fear, but devotion. "Alara, do you trust me?" Her eyes softened, but doubt lingered like shadow behind sunlight. "I want to," she whispered. "But I'm afraid." He lifted her hand, not claiming but cherishing. "Then let me earn it, every day, every breath." His thumb traced her knuckles, reverent, slow, devotion carved in touch. "I have spent my life being followed for what I own." He murmured, "You are the first person I follow for who I feel." Tears shimmered like diamonds in her lashes. Not dramatic, not broken, just human, and deeply moved. Outside, cameras still flashed, rumors still circled, the world still judged. But inside that small cafe, two hearts stood like warriors, trembling. Yes, but unyielding. They didn't have answers. They didn't have guarantees. They didn't even have safety anymore. What they had was a beginning, fragile, beautiful, real. And sometimes, beginnings are louder than endings. Adrian cupped her face, tender, grounding, as if memorizing a treasure. "We will walk through fire," he whispered, "but I will walk with you, not ahead." Alara leaned into his touch, afraid, yes, but choosing. Because love is not born in comfort. It is forged in storms. And as they stood there, amid the chaos and the world's gaze, they made a silent promise not to be perfect, not to have it easy, but to face the world, together. Love had not asked permission, and it would not apologize. This was only the beginning of the war for a heart worth more than empires. Storms don't always roar, sometimes they whisper as they break hearts. Days passed like chapters written in gold and grief. Adrian and Alara tried to live between two worlds, the quiet simplicity of her cafe and the sharp glitter of his empire. But the world was not gentle, not with them. Paparazzi hunted, socialites whispered, investors questioned, board members glared, and Adrian, Empire King, master of impossible negotiations, faced a battle he could not silence with wealth or power, a war against society's arrogance. One evening he arrived at the cafe after a brutal board meeting, where they demanded he end his distraction, or risk losing influence, losing power, losing the throne he had built from blood and brilliance. His face carried exhaustion, not from money or politics, but from the fear of losing something rarer than empires. Alara saw it the moment he walked in. She set down 2 mugs of tea. She always made one for him, even before he arrived, because her heart always felt him coming. "You're tired," she said gently. He gazed at her, eyes storm soft. "Tired of a world that measures worth in wealth." She smiled sadly. "And you built that world." His breath caught. "Truth is never gentle." "I built it," he whispered, "until I met the one thing I couldn't control. Love doesn't follow rules, it rewrites them." She touched his hand, small, soft, anchoring. He intertwined his fingers with hers, holding like a man holding air he must breathe to survive. You don't have to fight everything alone, she murmured. He shook his head softly. I don't fear losing power, I fear losing you. Her heartbeat trembled, but her eyes held a quiet ache. Adrian, what if we ruin each other? He stepped closer, voice raw velvet. Then we rebuild. Together. She looked away, tears forming, not from pain alone, but from love too big to hold. Your world is hurting mine, she whispered. And I can't let you lose yours because of me. His grip tightened, desperation sharpening into fear. Alara, don't say that. But her eyes already held the storm. I need to be strong for you. Even if it breaks me, she took a shaky breath. We need time apart. It hit him like a punch to the soul. No. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. You are not a chapter. He whispered fiercely. You are the whole book I never knew I was waiting to read. Her tears fell. Diamonds of heartbreak. And you are a universe I don't know how to breathe in without losing who I am. Silence. Heavy, painful, sacred. She leaned forward and placed her forehead against his. A goodbye that didn't want to be spoken. Let me find my strength, she whispered. Let me grow into a world that fits you without losing my own. He closed his eyes, a king surrendering not to defeat, but to love's cruel mercy. If you walk away, he murmured, voice breaking, don't expect me to stop loving you. She gave a trembling smile through tears. I don't want you to stop. I want your love to wait, not drown us. And then, she did the bravest thing love ever demands. She let go. He left the cafe without looking back, because if he had, he would have broken. Weeks passed. Alara worked quietly, building herself, healing wounds she never asked for. She learned strength not from pride but from pain. Adrian did not return, not because he didn't want to, but because he respected her courage. He buried himself in work, empire shining brighter. Yet inside he was a mansion full of lights with no warmth. A king in a burning palace of golden loneliness. Boardrooms clapped for his victories, but he left meetings feeling like a man walking through life holding a pulse but missing a heartbeat. Some nights, he drove past the cafe, never entering, just watching the lights, knowing she was inside, breathing, existing, being the only part of his world not for sale. Months later, on a soft spring evening, the cafe buzzed gently, soft music, warm lights, the scent of fresh bread and hope. Alara stood near the window, writing in her notebook, dreams blooming again. The bell above the door chimed. She lifted her head, and time stilled. Adrian stood there, no guards, no crown, no empire in his gaze, just a man who had waited, suffered, grown, and chosen love over power. He walked toward her slowly, as if the universe would shatter if he rushed. Lara, he breathed. Her lips parted, the ache of months dissolving into a single sacred breath. I didn't come to take you away, he said softly. I came to stand where you are, not above you, beside you. He pulled out a small velvet box, not dramatic, just reverent. Inside was not a diamond that screamed wealth, but a simple ring with a tiny sapphire, deep and soft like midnight oceans. A ring for a heart that doesn't need proving. He whispered, marry me, not into my world, but into our own. Her eyes flooded, not with fear, but with love grown stronger in absence. She stepped forward, voice trembling like prayer. I don't want your crown, she whispered. I only ever wanted your soul. He cupped her face, forehead against hers. Where goodbye once lived, rebirth now bloomed. And it has always been yours, he murmured. She nodded, a tear falling like a blessing. Yes, Adrian, yes. The cafe exhaled, the universe exhaled. And the Empire King kissed the girl who owned nothing. Because she owned the one throne money could never buy his heart. Love did not bow to power. Power bowed to love. And in that moment, wealth meant nothing. Because they had everything. In a world where power rises like glass towers and hearts often fall forgotten in shadows, Adrian Sterling discovered a truth even kings fail to understand. The greatest empire a man can ever conquer is the one within himself, and the only treasure worth surrendering to is love that arrives with empty hands yet fills every corner of the soul. Alara did not step into his life to be dazzled by wealth. She came with gentle hands, fearless honesty, and a heart that believed in him long before he believed in himself. She saw the man beneath the armor, the dreams beneath the discipline, the boy beneath the billionaire. In loving her, Adrian didn't lose power, he found meaning. He didn't fall, he finally learned how to rise beyond titles, beyond numbers, beyond the applause of a temporary world. Their love was not loud. It didn't need headlines. It lived in quiet mornings where he learned to smile without reason, in evenings where she sat by his side, writing dreams instead of counting riches, in moments where he held her hand not as a ruler, but as a man who finally felt whole. And when the world questioned, doubted, whispered, Adrian simply smiled. Because he knew something they didn't. A woman who owns nothing but love is more powerful than a world that owns everything but heart. So here ends not a fairy tale, but a reminder. You can build kingdoms of steel, you can shape destinies, you can stand at the top where clouds kiss ambition. But if you find a heart that beats for you, a soul that sees you, a love that demands nothing yet gives everything, do not let go. Empires fade, time humbles even legends. But love, pure, quiet, unwavering love, is the only thing that rules forever. And Adrian Sterling surrendered to that truth, not as a billionaire, not as a conqueror, but as a man who finally understood. The real victory was her. The real wealth was love. The real empire was built in their hearts. And in that surrender, he found eternity.